Oh my gosh. Hello everyone and welcome to Atomic Mash Transmissions Live. I'm Shick and today we're going to be diving in on Kingpin. Now, I do have a fun story and we're going to do things a little differently. Normally, I would just dive right into starting to apply paint onto my characters. However, I had a bit of a mishap. These things happen in the hobby as I was going from my hobby station / office desk this weekend down to the garage where I do my priming with my airbrush. My house is a circus. It's a zoo. There's lots of animals. There happened to be an animal underfoot on the steps, and I, lo and behold, dropped Kingpin. He went bouncing down the stairs, and he shattered into a lot of pieces. Now, the good news is he's a pretty robust fella, so I was able to fix most of them. However, unfortunately, his cane was destroyed in the process to the point where I was like, I can't even glue this back together. I wanted to take a moment today on the stream and actually show you guys how I'm going to approach fixing it. I don't have an extra part like many people would, but part of the hobby, over time is that, well, we take as best care of these miniatures as we can. Things happen. They get knocked off a table, you drop one, your wife drops a yearbook on one of your minis. That happened to me not so long ago either. Breakages happen, and sometimes you have to do a little hobbying to fix it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're just going to dive in. I'm going to show you a quick tutorial on how I'm going to fix the cane. And then we're going to go into painting this big man about town in New York. So let's hop over to the other camera. I'll kind of show you what we're working with. So I have repaired most of the parts. His arm fell off, his head fell off. We had all kinds of sad days. However, the cane, which is right here, obviously is broken. It is a very fancy cane. It's a dapper little thing. It is no more, and I didn't feel like trying to glue it back together. Don't throw them down the steps, and you'll probably be fine. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a little hobbyist trick. I have brass rod, and there's lots of different thicknesses. If you've never worked with brass rod for pinning before, it can be a hobbyist's best friend. You typically don't need to do it with hard plastic miniatures like Marvel Crisis Protocol, but it can add extra stability to certain joints and things like that. But it's a great way to make repairs. So what I'm going to do is I found some brass rod that I feel like is pretty much the thickness of the cane I want. Now again, this won't be the dapper thin cane because I'm not going to work on it. I'm just going to make him a nice little replacement cane. So effectively, this is going to be like his beater cane. This is when he goes for hardcore negotiations and you need something a little sturdier. You'll also notice they have a pin vise. So a pin vise is simply a tool that allows you to do some pretty simple and controlled drilling on small areas. Another really great tool to have in the hobby kit. If you don't have one, you can get them anywhere. And you can get a bunch of different drill bits. They'll basically fit everything. The drill bit just kind of screws right into the vise. That's why it's called a pin vise. And then you just simply manipulate with your hand to do the drilling. So what I'm going to do is I already kind of cleaned out the handhold, but you can see here that the cane connects into this slot here. So I'm just going to drill that out really quick. I already kind of did a little bit of work on it already so that we could do this, but I'm just going to set the drill in, and then I just kind of want to work the drill a little bit and clear out the cavity so that my pin right here will fit into that new hole. So you see now I've got a nice snug fit. So with that done, this is again a really quick simple fix, but if you were pinning apart or trying to repair something that had snapped in half, you could use pinning in the exact same way. You would just drill a hole in both parts. So for example, if I wanted to pin the head to the body, I would drill up into the head a little bit, I would drill down into the body a little bit, I would set my pin in there, probably using a thinner pin than this rod here. I would glue the pin in on one side, clip it with my clippers, which are right here. Again, my trusty hobby clippers, which are used for everything. And then I would set the pin, the piece onto the pin that's in the other part. So I would probably just do pin in body, put the head on, glue it, And then I would have a much sturdier join as well because that pin would hold things. And so that would be the case here. However, I'm just using the pin as a replacement part, so I don't have another part to pin. So I'm just going to grab my super glue. You will have to use super glue for this because obviously plastic glue will not. Whoa, and this is why we don't do it this way, but we're in a rush, so whatever. Grab a little bit of paper and just clean off this excess. Super glue won't bond to the brass rod, so you do have to use super glue for this. I'm just going to let it set in there. So now we have a super cane. Obviously, this is a bit long for the cane. We don't want it to be a stilt walker. So once that super glue has set, I'm just going to give it a minute. I'm going to grab my base, and I'm just going to set him on the base like this, and I'm going to kind of like measure out what I think the cane length should be. So it looks like we want right about to his foot. So this is where we just kind of play a little bit. I'm going to use the flat end of the clippers. I'm going to come in, and then I'm going to be very smart because I don't want this to shoot off like a bullet. And I'm going to hold the pin with one hand, and I'm going to snap it. And now we should, we did it right. There we go. We've got a fixed Kingpin with his cane. So a really quick and easy solution to kind of a really sad incident where my Kingpin will now have a very unique cane. So I'm just going to glue him to the base with my super glue. We're going to let him set for a second. So there you go. So now we have a replacement cane. People will pretty much be none the wiser. The fatter cane will make him kind of unique and my very own, but you can see how we kind of measured that out, and it's now set into the thing. Now, if I wanted to, I could take either a smaller piece of brass rod, and I could take some modeling putty. I could replicate the cane even closer. I could add like a fancy grip handle to the bottom of it. I could sand it down to give it more of a point. There are lots of different options for how to replace something like this when it breaks. I want to do something very simple and quick because I want to get to painting right now, and I'm not super concerned about it. No one's really going to pay too much attention to the cane as long as it's there. And like I said, we're just going to assume that this is the hard negotiation Kingpin, so he's taking his extra duty cane to use as a weapon. All right, I think that we're going to call the super glue pretty well dry, so let's go ahead and start with our painting. So again, breakages will happen. Obviously, we do our best to avoid it, but it does exist. And if that does happen, there are ways to fix it. There are ways to obviously address it, and that is one quick way to kind of make your miniatures whole again when they take unfortunate falls or unfortunate breakages through common handling or a catastrophic accident. I think today we're going to go with the black suited Kingpin. We'll let Dallas either do the white or do something else, but I feel like the black suit's going to make the most sense. Plus, if we assume that this Kingpin is expecting to get his hands a little dirty, you don't want to wear the white suit. The dry cleaning bills would just kill you. So I'm going to look for a good dark color to start. I think we're going to go with definitely not Holder blue. That's not black. No, I'm just going through and being indecisive on my color picks. Yeah, we'll use this. So I'm going to use Fantasy and Games color Negro Gray, which is kind of a nice bluish black. I think it'll look really good. It'll work well over our Zenith. So I'm just going to do what we typically do on our streams when we handle this stuff. We're going to use the Zenith Prime technique, which is all set up. And we're just going to turn this into a little bit of a wash using some glaze medium and the paint. And maybe a tiny bit of water to thin it out a little bit. Hope you guys who live in the States had a great Labor Day weekend. I know not everyone gets to enjoy Labor Day anymore if you work in the service industry or a couple of the other critical industries in our country. So if you did, I appreciate that as well. You guys keeping everything going. And if not, I hope that I hope you had a relaxing Monday. For those asking, he was primed with an airbrush. So the way we do the Zenith is that you just spray coat the miniature completely with either a black or a dark gray, and then come in after that first layer has dried at a 45-degree angle and spray with a light gray or a white. I prefer to use dark gray and light gray because I just find the colors work better, but you can use any kind of dark or lighter that you want. So you just come in from basically like this angle here, and you spray where that light would go. I'm going to bring my lights down. Maybe. Stop it. There we go. We'll illuminate our Kingpin a bit better. So now I have my wash, I think, pretty ready. We're just going to go in. We're just going to really quickly start layering down colors. I'm sure you guys have all seen it as well, but I know Josh just posted the panel to play for Wilson Fisk, which was very exciting. I was hoping that he'd do that so I could talk a little bit about game design and rules and all that good stuff as we kind of work along on our big, broad Wilson Fisk here. I'm going to leave those colors. We might do the colors red. We might have a little fun. So I'm just going to be careful not to hit the inside of the lapels and stuff. But yeah, Kingpin was definitely one of those characters that, you know, he's such a big player in so many of the comics, and he's kind of been the supervillain to Spider-Man, where he was first introduced, and now he's, of course, very closely associated with Daredevil, Matt Murdock. You know, he's one of those characters that he has a lot of different iterations, and he's done a lot of different things. People have their own kind of interpretation of him based on what run they read, when they read it. Did you watch the animated shows with him in it? Because, of course, he kind of functions differently in those as well. You've got Ultimate Universe Kingpin from the Bendis, you know, Ultimate Spider-Man and stuff. And all of those kind of have their own unique spins on the character and what he does and stuff. And so it was really fun to kind of work through what the quintessential Kingpin would be like for MCP and kind of how you unify a lot of that stuff and make him feel right without making him, you know, overpowered in the game or underpowered to what the game wanted, those kinds of things. Because obviously, pure mastermind mafioso crime boss you could do, but I think you'd be missing out on some of the more fun elements of what Marvel Crisis Protocol is about, which of course is beating up people in superhero smackdowns, throwing terrain, all of that good stuff. And luckily, you know, Wilson Fisk has always been kind of written in many of the stories as a character that the supers often underestimate, and that's kind of part of his strategy, right? He just looks like this big, slow, kind of fat man, and he's not. He's actually way more dangerous than his initial appearance would look. It's not fat. He's like 90% muscle in most of them, so he's super strong. And then, of course, he has a genius-level intellect in terms of being an organizer and a crime boss and all of this stuff. So he can really cause problems for the heroes and work things out pretty well. So it was fun to play with that. And then, of course, knowing that he was going to be the leader of the criminal syndicate, which was going to be our organized crime affiliation, it really came down to like what does that leadership mean? What are those groups about? We always try to identify a generalized theme for an affiliation. Like, what are they good at? What do they want to do on the tabletop? How do they play differently from any other affiliation? You know, the Cabal, and then you have your somewhat catch-alls. You know, the Avengers obviously is a big group, so it encompasses a lot of different heroes. Or the Cabal is kind of the anti-Avengers, the bad guy conglomeration. But even those affiliations have kind of their design in terms of what they want to do, what they excel at. The Cabal is very much about dealing damage and you know, being combat focused, whereas the Avengers affiliation, partly through the leaderships and stuff, is a little more focused on being slightly more defensive, more like supery, more super heroic, I guess, in that the Captain America leadership obviously allows them to use a lot more superpowers more effectively and things like that. So they do get kind of these identities, these things that they want to do, and we play with. I should move my water cup so that's a little easier to reach than all the way across my desk. That's what a smart person would do. But it seemed pretty, like, very early on, I kind of always knew that, the organized crime affiliation, that group would be really focused on objective play. It would want to, they're not the ones necessarily to go toe to toe with your Avengers. They're going to work under the radar. They're going to use kind of their organization, their ability to sneak around, all of that stuff, their stealth, to be able to manipulate things to their advantage. And Wilson Fisk is kind of the perfect example of that. This is a guy who's a legitimate businessman, quote unquote, and yet he's the greatest criminal mastermind in the Marvel, at least Marvel New York City, maybe the Marvel universe. There's a lot of cosmic folk out there that might put a run for his money. It's hard to say. I don't know what the whole galaxy holds, but certainly in New York, he's the top. He's the top banana, as it were. And of course, recently he's also connived his way into being the mayor of New York City. So you're talking about a guy who can really influence things to his benefit. He knows how to play systems. He knows how to get his way. And so all of that kind of came back to, playing that objective game, being able to manipulate objective tokens, having the hired muscle be able to control them better, because they're big and strong and intimidating. Those kinds of ideas really played into that flavor that we wanted from the Criminal Syndicate. And the thing that I really liked is that a lot of this kind of formulated when I was having an initial playtest meeting with Josh, and everybody I think was on Christmas vacation or something at the time, and we were talking about the Web Warriors affiliation and kind of what that affiliation wanted to do in terms of its gameplay and stuff. And Josh was very much of the idea that they needed to be all about kind of defending, grabbing objective tokens, protecting people. He helped kind of define the initial ideas on the leadership. He's very shiny black. Alright, so we're just going to go in and we're going to grab some, let's go, why not, Holder Blue. We're going to use some Holder Blue, and we're going to mix it into our black, because I like Holder Blue. It's becoming a quickly favorite color. We're just going to create some highlights, and we're going to have to do some wet blending, I think, with this man. And so that also really helps solidify it, because I feel like, the Criminal Syndicate is kind of the most direct foil to the Web Warriors, The Web Warriors are all about protecting people and upholding the little guy, and the Criminal Syndicate is all about doing everything they can to get ahead and steal, be all kind of illicit and gross. Everyone's asking who's in the affiliation. I mean, I think you can guess for the most part. You've obviously got several characters who have been released so far that make a lot of sense. They're certainly part of that overall criminal idea and organization. And then there were a couple that, are less conspicuous, but I think they still fit the bill. Like, for example, your MODOKs of the world who control organizations like AIM. AIM is another legitimate, quote-unquote, business that certainly has its own kind of illicit dealings and dark subterfuge past. You got characters like Kingpin or Taskmaster, who obviously is a bit more mercenary in terms of what he does, but as well often finds himself running in criminal circuits. Bullseye, easy one there, obviously. Has worked for Fisk several times and on his own, but certainly fits that kind of Criminal Syndicate idea. So with this color, I'm just kind of going through and I'm hitting the raised areas and doing a bit of highlighting just to give that black, which is really shiny on camera right now, a bit of life and some nice highlighting. And then what we'll do is we'll go back through and we'll use a bit of We'll go back through and we'll use a bit of a glaze to just tone everything back down into kind of our black, but this is kind of going to be a little bit of a process here. And we're just going to play around and have some fun and build up some color. But you definitely, black is one of those colors, just to hop back to some painting theory. We've talked about this before. But white is defined by shadows and black is defined by its highlight. So when you're painting black, you really want to think about what your highlight color is. Because most things, if you look at them, if you look at like a black piece of cloth or, you know, black fur or anything like that, you're going to notice that there's very little black to it. It's more defined by the darkness of the highlight. So you've got your blue blacks, your purple blacks, red blacks. You can do any kind of black. And all of those are going to kind of change the overall look and feel of the color and the miniature and the material. My go-to typically for blacks is blues, although you can get some really rockin' purples. And now I feel like maybe purple would have been the right choice, but we're down this blue route. We like Hulky blue, we're just going to go with it. But yeah, when you're doing blacks, to make your blacks really pop, you really want to think about the highlights to them. And not just mix in white to make a gray. You can do that, but you wind up with a really dull, kind of a really dull black. So if you want a really poppy, like rich black, you want to add color to it. That is not white. And that'll give you that really rich, heavily saturated black that's going to feel really nice. It's going to look really good. It's just going to kind of like build it out. So there you go, painting blacks. And with white, it's the opposite. You want to make sure that you have a lot of shadows, and that those colors are really defined, and you can use different colors for your shadows, although white's a little less forgiving on the options that you have. I'm sure you can shade white with anything if you have enough skill, but the easiest method there, unlike black, where you can kind of go crazy with a lot of different colors of black because it's a pretty forgiving color. I'm going off camera here. Are typically your blues or your blue grays. You get purple in there if you keep it like really lavender. I've seen some good purples. But my go-to on white is typically a blue-gray shade. Because it just winds up giving you the best results, and it's pretty easy. I have no doubt that Dallas will probably do white suit Kingpin on Thursday, although he might do purple suit. You never know. Dallas is a wild card. But I think we can lock him into white suit. See, I cheated because I already did my white suit Kingpin. So I didn't want to do another white suit. Plus, I really went crazy with this guy, and I used the airbrush for the white suit. So black suit. I need the black suit Kingpin. He's the suit style I'm missing right now. So I'm just doing another kind of like highlight with the blue to really pick out these colors. And again, the camera's not great at picking up kind of these subtle shades, so you'll just have to trust me when I say that even though if it doesn't look different to you, it is looking quite different in person. I'll post some pictures up on the Facebook group as I get going. Through the process and stuff, so that you guys can kind of see where he winds up if our camera continues to not really want to pick up this really rich black we have going on. Alright. I'm pretty happy with that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more Hulder blue, and then we're going to grab a gray. We're going to grab a blue gray. So I'm going to use this Arctic blue. I'm just going to mix a little bit of that in, and because it's got the blue in it, it's going to help enhance my color without washing it out. Because I don't want to take it, again, I don't want to take it to that like really white gray. And this color is going to be pretty punchy. So we're going to just use it, and we're going to blend it in, and we're going to use it kind of sparingly here. But you'll be able to see on my thumb here, that's my highlight color. So you can see it's pretty punchy. It's definitely going to stand out against that darker black. And so I'm going to switch down to a one size brush just because I want a little more control on this. Now I'm going to use my bigger brush to blend. And then we're just going to go in and we're just going to start going. Yeah, I will say, you know, you can paint whites in a lot of ways, but the way that I have the most success with whites, especially on large surfaces like that, is use an airbrush. It's not the only way, but I will admit there are things that I don't like painting. I've talked about it before. I really don't care much for yellows. And I really don't like painting whites that much, especially over large areas. I struggle with them. So for me, the airbrush is kind of an easy cheat code for both those colors because you can get really smooth coverage really easily. And I just find that they work better for me. And then there are colors I can't do with an airbrush very well. Like, I really, shockingly enough, haven't been able to do blacks super well to where I've been really, really happy with it. And I've not had a lot of luck with greens. So there's colors that you know how to paint in certain ways and that work for you, and there are ones that you don't. That's okay. We use whatever tools work. And I'm sure with a little practice and perseverance I could start to. I've gotten better at whites and I've certainly gotten better at yellows over time by kind of pushing myself, and I talked a little bit about that. But you know, if you have the tools, then use them, and it's supposed to be enjoyable. Whatever you're doing, you're just supposed to enjoy it, and I think it's really fun. I think airbrushing is really fun, but so I like using it more for just priming at times, and when I have the opportunities to do whites and stuff like that, I totally will. And the Kingpin was a great opportunity to do that. And it saved me some headache and some frustration. Trying to get those whites to look nice and smooth. Buttery smooth. But yeah, so the Criminal Syndicate, it really takes into account most of the characters that you would associate with being thieves or part of organized crime as part of it. So it winds up with a pretty kind of eclectic mix. It's not quite Defenders level of broad reach yet, but you know, they do not have a Hulk. I could definitely see Emil Blonsky being part of it though someday. Maybe they'll have a Hulk answer if we ever, when and if we wind up going that direction. The cape. Oh, I see. We're not talking about Kingpin anymore. Yeah? How would you? You know, there's ways. You can do a lot of things when it comes to hard plastic. And these things work. But yeah, Kingpin was he's a very fun character to play test and work with. And I'm really excited. One of the things I always get super excited about is not just seeing the characters come to life on the table, but it always really excites me when you can kind of see a new affiliation or new characters that come out that are really going to cause people to look at the game differently. I feel like Criminal Syndicate is one that really does that. Kind of like Web Warriors. Web Warriors and Criminal Syndicate were the two affiliations, I think, in the initial batch of stuff when we were testing and working on things where we really knew that they were going to shake up potentially how people approach the game, what questions you might have to ask of your opponent, what answers you would have to be prepared for in your roster. So, Criminal Syndicate to me, because of how they play the objective game and how we've talked about the objective game is the most critical aspect of Marvel Crisis Protocol, because even though we're here to fight and beat each other up, we have to have a reason to fight. So the objectives are how you win. The way they can manipulate stuff and the way their characters specifically interact with that, and certain characters on the roster or on the affiliation card and stuff, and the tech that they bring. And this includes some future items that I won't spoil, because I'm sure I want to see that on the card and let Josh have his moment. They all have a pretty fun impact on the game that you can play and whether or not you want combat to be kind of a thing. And I think Web Warriors do that in a similar way because they're so defensive. They obviously make the, well, I'll just beat you up and then I'll score points later game much more difficult. But they also have a lot of objective control, you know, all the different pulls and pushes and throws and everything that they have access to. They can really play a different kind of game style than an Avengers or a Cabal list necessarily wants to or might be built to. And so I think that like forces some questions too that you have to think about when you're constructing your roster. If you know you're looking for that epic win condition, and if not, if you just want to go in, the Criminal Syndicate adds a super awesome narrative flavor to it, because now you can have your Spider-Man and your Punisher and your Daredevil facing off against Kingpin and his goons, and really diving into the whole, I think, chewy center of a lot of those storylines for those characters, which is based around organized crime and, you know, not super high stakes Avengers cosmic threat level stuff, but more the Kingpin's just not being a very nice guy. He's organizing bank heists and he's stealing old people's pension funds and stuff. So your friendly neighborhood spider folk and man without fear and stuff needs to go solve it. We're go back to our color here. We're just doing the last little highlights on some of the pants edging. So we're just looking again for those areas of folds that would get hit by the light really hard. I'm just using my second brush to blend out my blues. So now I think you can kind of see it start to come together on the camera. You can see how we have some volume and some dimensions going on with those folds. I'll just punch it up even more with our next layer. But because we have such a big, you know, the suit is really all Kingpin here. He's just a man in a very snappy suit. I'm taking a lot of extra time than normal with my blending and with getting some good layers and getting some really good highlights on this guy. And again, part of that is this will really sell the blacks and will make the blacks really nice. But also because once I'm done with the suit, there's really not going to be that much to do. So we're going to be able to burn through that stuff really quick. And so we want that focal point, the main piece of this character, which is that suit, to really get some love and attention. So we're going to go back to that Arctic blue. Brush again to blend out. So this brush here is, of course, my blending brush. It has no color on it. So when you see me kind of working that, it's just slightly damp, and I'm just using it to come in, and I'm blending my colors out using wet blending, which is a big douse technique. And it's really great for kind of smoothing two colors out. It's not a wet blend because my lower paint level is dry. If I was wet blending, I'd be using two wet paints. This is just blending one of the colors by using a second brush over the top. And so you got to keep your paints pretty thin for this. Slightly thinner than you would for like a normal base coat or anything like that, so that they will blend. But you're mostly using the moisture of that second brush to help blend stuff out. Now we have our super punchy highlight color. We may have gone too far on this, but that's okay because we're going to tone everything back down. Oh, switch my brushes. Go back. Now I'm going to go to my zero brush just because I like having more control. And I'm going to make some finer lines. And you'll see how that color right there is much punchier than our highlight color even was. And I just want to come in and I'm just going to start sketching out some nice edges and do some folds and stuff. So that we can really feel the volume on this guy and the folds of the clothes and stuff. So this is a pretty reserved. We're not going too crazy with it because this is really punchy. It's really going to pop out. So this is kind of like those zings of highlight. Most places where the light is really coming in hard and heavy. We're getting that sense that what's going on. And these highlights are going to do the most work. So on a black or a really dark surface, it's these kind of like super highlights that are going to really sell the idea that you've got a really dark piece of cloth, more so than anything else, because they're going to be the most visible. And so you really just want to think about your placement and where these are going. You want to be pretty controlled with them. That's why we have this second brush, so we just come in and blend it out. I'm just looking for really tight, thin lines with this color. Like I said, it's just adding that extra pop. So this can kind of be like the extra stretching of the fabric. Or it can be the super shot highlights on the fold, little zings of light as they bounce off that black. Whatever you want them to be. and wherever you feel like they're best served to go. There's no right or wrong answer. But you can see now how we have this really nice, this is coming through on the camera, these nice little fold definitions here. And that's all from those zings of the light color. Will the Punisher be added to the Defender's roster? Time will tell. Frank Castle was never much of a man to play with others, though. I'll say that. So I don't know if I'd bank too much on him being a team player just about anywhere. He's kind of a Los Lobos, if you will. I think he's begrudgingly helped out once or twice when it suited his own purposes, but I don't ever really remember him asking for, for a team card. He doesn't usually want to sign up for your newsletter. But yeah, with everything, the challenge is always you have so many different versions of characters, and they do team up all the time, but that's kind of why, we designed the Crisis Protocol team system to be so open and loose, so that if you want Frank to be on the Defenders, and he doesn't wind up on the card in this iteration, which, you can still add him to the Defenders. He'll gain the vast majority of the benefits. In fact, I don't think the Defenders really have any Defender cards right now that would stop him from even feeling like a full part of the team. So that's also, a consideration, right? Not everybody has to be part of an affiliation to still be able to play on the affiliation, and that allows a lot of flexibility for you all to tell the stories you want and build the teams that you always wanted to see, or the teams that you remember, because again, there's so many iterations of these characters and different creative teams and stories and stuff like that. Like, there's no way that we can make one rule set for one character that's going to incorporate everything somebody thinks about. And that's why I think the way that we've approached team building and stuff like that, I really like. Because when I remember a run of Spider-Man or X-Men soon that I really liked, but is not necessarily what one would call the most canonically accurate, or even something that had more than a 4-issue shelf life across 5 different titles, I can still do that. I can make it, and it'll work, and it's going to be my team and my ability, and when I want to really just go completely crazy and mix all my stuff to make my dream squad that's never going to exist, I can do that too. When I want the real Avengers, which includes Taskmaster and Crossbones and Captain America and Iron Man and Agent Widow on it, I can totally do that in the game, and I can fit my narrative and kind of my comic desires, and it's exactly what I wanted. So don't get too hung up, I guess, would be my suggestion, on whether somebody's on an affiliation card now or not. And I think, as Dallas said in the chat too, just because there are names on the affiliation cards, that doesn't mean we're telling you the whole story. We like to give you guys a roadmap of what's coming, but within reason. If we know we have certain characters coming in 2021 or 2022, because we're testing and working on them now, which we totally would be based on timelines and stuff, we have a pretty far out view. That doesn't mean that they're going to wind up on, you know, the team affiliation card that comes out with Kingpin next month, because there's no reason to do that to you or ourselves or anything like that. You know, we can't always be assured of what's coming when, exactly in the dates, and what good does it do to be on the card now, you know? I know the Spider Foes one, a lot of people were like, well, what about this person? What about that person? It's like, what about them? When they show up, they'll get added to the team affiliation card. And if you think they won't show up, you got to be crazy. Because we're going to do everybody eventually. You know, given the time and the ability. Given a long enough timeline and, you know, the demand for people to want to keep playing this game and enjoying the hobby and stuff, like, we'll get to them. We want to do everybody. If we can, you know, Marvel Crisis Protocol every single character in the Marvel Universe, who's going to say no to that? Not us. I want everybody to have their favorite character, whether I agree or not. Whether I agree that Stiltman is a character that needs to be made doesn't change the fact that I want to make Stiltman for the people who want him, and I want to make Stiltman as fantastic a Stiltman as he can be for Marvel Crisis Protocol. I used that because I saw a Stiltman confirmed thing in the chat, but sub in any Marvel character name. You know, just like in life, every character is made better through the strength of all the other characters. We're all made better by each other. So why artificially limit that pool or that potential for any reason? Your mammoth is a different option, Dallas. Let's not talk about the mammoth. This is not the time nor the place. Your mammoth is one of physical space. Plus, on a long enough timeline, we'll get to your mammoth. I just said not right now. Man Spider, look, if it's part of Marvel, it goes back to my statement of someday I would love to get there, you know? Man Spider, Man of Spiders, the Spider-Man who's actually just a colony of super intelligent spiders. Look, we go all day. All day. Japanese Spider-Man would be amazing. Dallas could get his giant robot. Change Leopardon. One of the best lunch shows I think I've ever binged. So it's all definitely there. So now we're just to the Zen moment where I'm just blending out highlight colors and rambling about things. But this has pretty much been just consistently the same technique, same idea. Just been using this stream highlight. I'm coming across the edge of the seam in the jacket, and so I'm just using the edge of the brush to really pick out the edges, and I'm going to let that be really sharp. So we kind of have like an edge highlight going on there. This other arm. Colors on this arm. And Stan Lee, I mean, I'd consider it. Absolutely. The man, the myth, the legend, 100%. I think that would be phenomenal. Somebody's just got to tell me that they're on the list of approved things, and I will dive at the chance to make those approved things. So. Yeah, I don't think you can get. I mean, one of the great things about Mr. Stan Lee, and I think to his credit and Marvel's kind of credit, is that Stan really became a relatable face for the Marvel Universe, and he gave that kind of avatar for standing in. You know, we all kind of see ourselves a little bit in the Stan Lee cameos and the way in which he somewhat integrated himself into this fantastical universe. I think he kind of was the forerunner of showing everybody that living in that dream world of imagining being part of the Marvel Universe as a fan and as an avid lover, you know, was a cool thing to do. So here's a guy who does it all the time. So I really appreciate that. And also, it was a lot of fun working on something like Marvel Crisis Protocol, where, you know, we get to kind of carry on that legacy a little bit and encourage people to put their own mark on the universe they love through their hobbying and their playing and the stories they tell with each other, and engaging with that world in a way that promotes, I think, everything that's great about it, which is the creativity and the fantasy of it. So I'm just using the edge of the brush, and I'm just kind of hitting some of the really sharp folds on Mr. Kingpin's kind of zoot suit pants. These are definitely not super tight tailored pants, you know. He's got to have some breathing room for when he gets into the karate. Because as you know, Mr. Wilson Fisk is a 9th degree black belt in the deadliest martial art alive, karate. So you don't want to have the skin tight pants going on when you find yourself in a broken down negotiation, street level negotiations, as it were. So again, edge of the brush, not using the point, just the edge. It makes hitting those really sharp lines so much easier. It's almost like doing a dry brush, in that you're just very gently scraping the brush over where you want the paint to apply, and allowing the three-dimensional nature of what you're painting to do the work for you. This is a really great way to do like edge highlighting and stuff like that if you want to do kind of more of that. Now I'm just going through and I'm just adding a couple zings of color, stretch mark wise. And again, I'm just giving life. This is all about giving that life to the blacks of the suit. Before we're done, I'm pretty happy with this. Probably spent a little more time on the back of the suit than I needed to. But let's be honest, when you play a game, this is the side of the miniature you see the most. So you should play it, spend a little bit extra time. A little bit of extra time on painting that 3/4 down back view, because that's the side that you're going to see when you play with the character all the time. So make sure that that looks nice. It's okay to spend a little extra time. But like we've talked about, don't worry so much about down here. No one's ever really going to see the legs. Definitely no one's going to see the legs back here, so you can be a little less worried about that. Spend your effort and time where, you know, a lot of eyes are going to fall and people are going to gravitate towards. So up here, the upper torso, the face for sure. As humans, our first intention every time is to go straight to the face, because that's just kind of like how we identify humanness. It's also why we see faces in places where there aren't faces, because we're so hardwired for that. So that upper torso area, head, shoulders, chest, you know, unless there's something like attention demanding that's not there. For example, you have a TV face in your chest or something. You've got another creature popping out of your torso at like stomach height or things like that. Like that's where you want to spend that time really dialing in the look of your paint job. And then, like I said, you know, you're going to see this side a lot when you're playing. So, you know, give it a little extra love, get a little extra attention, because it's just going to make you know that the front side of the miniature that your opponent sees is just as exciting and fun and good. And that's what we want. So, all right. So, pull my light out just a little bit. Now, and you can see all this work that we did is not just flat black. So we have some really nice definition going on our suit. Some really nice pops of color on the shoulder. We really like developed out that black. So what we have left is we need to go around and we need to work on the lapels. Now I'm looking at it, I'm probably like, oh, this collar probably should be black too. I failed on that. I'll go back and fix that later. We got to do the undershirt, we got to do the boots, and we have to do our cane. But overall, it should be pretty quick, and we are at our hour, so I'm going to hop off this view. We're going to go to this view. And let's see, do we have any last questions that are going on? If we ever do Superior Spider-Man, will he be in every team? He is in every team. Again, like we talked about, you can put characters you love in any team you want. That's the beauty of Marvel Crisis Protocol. So just put them in. Find your favorite characters, fit them in everywhere, see how they work, build around them if you want to. Don't let things stop you. Like, tell the stories that you want. The game is there to allow that. So dive in and just go crazy. But otherwise, guys, thank you for joining me. Be sure to check out Dallas's stream this Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific. I know that he'll be doing Kingpin as well, and we'll see what suit color he decides to pick for his. I saw a lot of requests for white, so maybe we'll get to see a classic Kingpin done the Dallas Kemp way. Otherwise, join me back here on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific again, as we will wrap up our Kingpin and take him across the finish line so that he'll be ready for some street-level negotiations. And then otherwise, be sure to watch all of our social media for all of the reveals and hot new items that are coming out. I know that Josh just posted the panel of play for Kingpin, so if you're curious about his rules and just want to get an overview of what the character is about and how we approach designing him, be sure to check that out. I'm sure the stat card will be on its way soon. And then last but not least, if you haven't seen it, there was a post that went up on our Facebook group for a charity auction for Nova. Some of the greatest painters came together to paint some MCP miniatures, and it's going towards a worthy cause. So be sure to check out that as well, so that, you know, we can do some great stuff, support some people who definitely need it, and maybe score some cool things along the way. And then, of course, check out the amazing stuff. And last but not least, we have hashtag painting protocol, as Dallas has reminded me. This month's challenge is Spider-Verse. So I think Dallas said you can paint any of your spider people that you want. I'm going to go so far as to say, go ahead and paint spider foes too. Why should they be left out? So I want to see some Green Goblins. I want to see some Doc Ocks. I want to see all kinds of cool stuff. along with our Peter Parkers and our Miles Moraleses and our Venoms. So let's just do all of Spider-Verse. Josh, I just made that decision right now. Put it in there, Spider-Verse it is, so whatever you want. We'll be announcing the staff picks for the last competition challenge, last painting challenge, that's what it's called, from last month, which was Metallics, here soon. So watch the streams for that. I would assume next week we'll be showing off our favorite picks, as we're just going through and selecting them now due to the holiday weekend. So with that, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you peoples all had a great time. Be safe, be sound. We'll see you on Thursday, and then I'll see you back here on Tuesday to finish out our Master of Crime, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Until then, take care. Goodbye.